Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. You there, Mike?
I am here.
Hi there. Good. So hi, everybody. Welcome. This is our last coffee break of the season. We pick back up in the fall. So today, Mike Taylor is going to be showing us price list updates. I think you have 4 methods, right, Mike?
Yep, 4 today.
Okay, good. So it's all yours. If anybody has questions, you can use the chat box, and I'll unmute you if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. Let me just make sure I'm unpaused. Okay, so as Tracy mentioned, there are quite a few ways to update prices in SAP. There's kind of benefits and drawbacks to each, as you would expect. So I'm going to talk about these 4 and kind of compare and contrast them and just give you a quick overview on each. I'm not going to go into incredible detail with any of them in specific. So what I'm going to do first is just the copy and paste method. If you're not super familiar with, I think maybe 9.3 and up, I can't remember when it started, but you can actually copy tables out of SAP, edit it in Excel, and then paste it back. So we'll start with that one.
That makes sense that it was 9.3, Mike. We had that question this morning. I think you're right on that.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a really underused feature. Everybody's still clicking the Excel export button, and they should just remove that. It's not really required for most things because you could just copy a grid. So I'll show that in more detail. The second one, which is my current favorite, due to the fact that any customer can do it, any user can do it, and it doesn't require the DTW to be installed. It doesn't require any credentials, SQL credentials, HANA credentials. So I'll show you that one right through the SAP client. Then you have, of course, the tried and true DTW, or the data transfer workbench. It's great. I think it's more of a consultant tool. Honestly, if I can avoid it, I do avoid it. It can do a lot of things, but it's also the most complicated. I'll show that as well. And then we'll show the price update wizard as well, which in certain situations will be useful. And I'll kind of give you just an overview and a tour of it in case you have never used it. Just close this. Okay, so the first way that I'm going to do this is the copy and paste method. So we have our price list. So basically you can do this with any grid you want, or matrix it's officially called. I'm just going to happen to use it for the sales price list. So I don't want to do all these, so I'm going to select just a short group. So if you're constantly using this MS Excel feature, especially if you're a cloud customer, I really recommend you stop using it. If you take away one thing from this webinar, just go right click, copy table, and that puts this whole grid of information, or any grid or matrix from SAP, as long as you have the right version. I don't remember now when this started. Into your clipboard, and you can copy it from a remote desktop session and then paste it right into Excel directly. So I already have it here, but you can literally just go copy and paste, and it pastes that whole grid. I'll just show you here that I'm not messing around. So it'll paste the whole grid. The only thing that you need to remember, in this case, I have leading zeros. So before I paste, I want to highlight the whole range, format the cells, and make it text. I don't want it to get rid of the leading zeros. It just will keep the information cleaner. Okay, so now we can edit this, and we can actually copy it and paste it back. So just to show that again, on any grid, whether you're using a query, whether you're using a document, you can right click, copy the table, and again, avoid using this. The only, I guess, reason for this in some limited situations would be to export documents to Excel, which I don't recommend anyways, and there's a bunch of caveats around it. But anyway, right click, copy table, make sure it's it's a text definition if you are somebody that has leading zeros. If not, it's not as big of a deal. Leave it in this same format, then you can make some changes here. So I'll just change this to 70, you know, however you want to manipulate this, you just do your formulas, have everything ready to go. I will just do this. Then I'll copy it. I want to copy it with the headers in this case, because SAP uses the headers in order to determine what column to paste it into. If you don't have the headers, it will try to paste it just based on the shape of it. And in most cases, that's not going to work. And you'll see why here. I can't start the paste. I can't start the paste in this inactive field. So I have to go to any active field and just push paste. Do the contents include header information? If you're doing this correctly, you would push yes. Again, you don't usually use it without the headers. And it'll just go through. And this, it's pretty tolerant of groups of data. I would say it's the slowest method if you have, say, thousands or tens of thousands. So in this case, it's very quick, but you're going to need a second per row, and it's going to have slowdown. And you're also potentially, you know, if there's some issue, you could get a crash at some point. So you just want to make sure that you match the style of the column. In this case, I have the dollars. I don't think you even need the dollar symbol. It'll just assume that 30 is your default dollar symbol. So I just kept it the exact same way, but you can just leave it like that. If it is a foreign currency, you would need to put the USD in front of it just to make it look exactly like you see it in the form, as if a human had entered it. So that's USD. So I would just put USD 30 and then it will simulate the same thing. Okay, click update. So this I would say is better for quick. Right click, copy table, paste, you know, filter for the ones you want to update, boom. You can do your selection criteria by a group, by a range. You could use an item property. You could do all sorts of things. Just make sure that whatever you're doing, it's going to do it in the rows in the order that you copy it to Excel. So it's not going to match it to the item code, which is a benefit of the other methods where it matches the item code rather than, I would say, kind of the shape of the data. Okay, so that's that copy and paste method. The second method is my current favorite, and I knew this existed, but I hadn't really, you know, lack of documentation, blah, blah, blah. I hadn't really explored it too much. I just was so comfortable using DTW that I didn't explore this that much. The nice thing about this, again, is the users using it only need authorization to it. They don't need the data transfer workbench installed on their machine. They don't need SQL or HANA credentials. They don't need to understand the file formats for the DTW. They just need to basically follow this protocol and it will work for you. So you have administration, data import, export, data import, import from Excel. We're not importing business partners today. You can see there's quite a few other things too, but we're just going to go to price lists. You have to kind of build this, but it's basically just select price list number first and then select item number. It forces all of these additional columns. So this one's very straightforward and you can save it as a template here. So I just save this as a basic template. For all intents and purposes, you don't need anything other than this. So what I do now is you can either build this up, or I do have a query that I've already built. So if you would like this, just let me know if you know my email, or shoot a message to Tracy and we will provide this. It looks somewhat complicated, but it's actually really straightforward, and it pulls the data exactly how you would need it to paste it in there. In my case, I just filtered for the top 7, again, just for the sake of a webinar. I'm just going to keep it simple. So you do need to know how to run a query. So in SAP Business One, you can't just put a new query. You have to kind of do this little workaround to run it manually. So tools, queries, query generator. You just have to put execute. This is where there's no just like new query button. You just push execute. It will fail, but it will allow you to just paste your query in here. Many people will be familiar with this. Paste in, you can run whatever you want here. You don't have to kind of build it through the query generator. And the query generator is good. It's just, we're just going to run something we've already written. Execute. This uses the SAP out of the box style selection criteria, which works for this. I'm just doing the sales price list today. And then remember, I'm only getting the top 7. So this is going to give you price list number in the correct order, and it's going to give you all of the things that you need in terms of what you're going to be uploading. We will again use the little trick that I taught you in the first section, the copy table. Again, please stop using this icon. It's just annoying, and there's a whole bunch of different things that make it annoying, especially if you're a cloud customer. Just annoying. Right click, copy table. That's it. It's already in your clipboard. You don't have to export, do anything. It's going to save you, 30 seconds, a whole bunch of times a day, potentially, if you use that. In this case, I already have this set up because I've tested it. But if you do have leading zeros, same thing. From A to J, right click, format cells, text. So only reason I did that is because I have leading zeros. You don't need to do that. I paste it, the same thing, just to demonstrate it's the same thing. Pasting. You can see that I have, let me just clear this out just in case it leaves nulls in there. You can see that, it forces you to have these columns, but it's a good thing to understand too. The original item list price, but it also has the additional prices. And in this case, it's a USD currency. So you don't need to maintain separate price lists, one for Canadian, one for USD if you don't want. The nice thing about this is if the business partner is in USD, it will use the USD price. If they're in Canadian, it will use the Canadian price. So if you have complete pricing, you would only need to maintain the one price list, and that's it. You don't have to have this price list for, one for Canadian and one for the US. You can keep it just one sales price list. I don't know why these are there. Must be 0 prices on there. Okay, so we're going to save this. What I do here is save as. So make sure you save this before doing this step. So make sure you save it. This is kind of picky, but you need to do it in this order, and I'll explain to you why. Save your worksheets before you save it as a text file. If you save the document, if you save this as a text file, which I'm about to do, file, save, this PC, then I'm going to go tab delimited, and I'm going to go to my price list update and replace it. It's going to give you these warnings. It's just saying it's going to strip out all these other tabs and all the formatting. That's basically it. Now, if you do that and you keep working in these other tabs, it's all gone. Everything's gone. I always think at this point, I have to close this spreadsheet. I've done so much DTW work, so much work in this type of system. I've made so many mistakes in this way. I'd recalculate things, and then I lose it doesn't save any changes to the original worksheet after this. So I just close this. I can always reopen my XLSX original file and then keep editing it. But once I save it out to text, to tab delimited, I do not edit anymore, because again, it becomes that file. So it's a little kind of picky, but it'll save you a lot of trouble. And trust me, I've made that mistake many times and lost a lot of work and had to redo it. So once you've saved this as a text file, there's one small step. You have to go in here and just clear out these column headers. Now, if you wanted to, I do this sometimes, you can clear this out here or paste it into another sheet, then just save it without the headers. I find it just as easy to go to the tab, go to the text file and edit it out rather than editing it in the original thing. Because if I come back here, I still want to know what column's what. So again, you can either make another sheet, take this, exit out, paste it, come here, go here, and then save it. or you can just kind of leave it. I usually will just leave it and take it out in the text. Okay, so let's just close this. Again, best practice, don't save any of that. We have our price list update text. We will just take from here and get rid of it. It doesn't want to see the header columns. Why it can't ignore the first row, make our lives easier, I don't know, but it will give you, and you could just live with the error on the first row too, if you're feeling pro. I guess I just have a weird thing about seeing the errors. I don't want to see them. Close this down. Go back to your import from Excel, find the file to import. I don't mess a lot with any of these other ones. I'll usually just click import and it's going to go through. So you can see updated, updated, updated. Anything that you would have changed in there, you will see now reflected in the item. And that's it. So again, I think I've done up to 5,000 by this method. It's quite stable. This is V10, so it's quite stable, especially on SQL. And it actually has a little bar at the bottom that will kind of fill up as you're going. And I think even on the newer versions, it has a little stop button to stop it properly. You don't want to kind of Control-Alt-Delete it. You will not be able to work in your SAP client while it's doing that. So if you have issues where you need to pop in and do something, either do this in the evening or break it out into smaller chunks where you can just split your files up into different groups. The nice thing about this again is it references the item number. You don't have to have this like the copy and paste where you've actually selected it in the user interface. This will read what item it is, what price list it is, and then it will do the updates for you. Okay, I think that's it for that. All right, so we have the infamous data transfer workbench. So here we have our data transfer workbench. Always run your data transfer workbench as administrator. Actually, I'll log off again. So this is where the DTW kind of becomes inaccessible for somebody that's a little less technical or somebody that's not comfortable with remote desktop windows. I think the client side import is the most easy for a client or a user to understand, where you just have to make that sheet exactly how you see it here. This is it. This is the whole thing. And then you can run it. You already have access. If you're, I believe you have to be a super user to use the import. For the DTW, again, you could do a lot of cool stuff. The requirements for understanding it are just a little bit higher. And again, you're going to need to actually put the server in, put the server credentials in, etc. So once you get through it, it's definitely not impossible. There's just a little bit of a barrier to entry. So now what you have to do is prepare your files for this. So I have another little helper query that I use that I will just run here. And this gives me the information that I need in order to set my line nums and my price lists correctly for the files. So you can go to like start program files, SAP Business One, data transfer workbench, and get the templates. But I just have like these ones. These are the basic ones that I use. Record key, line num, price list, price, and currency. And due to the way that does the update, it just needs to be set in this exact way. So you see line num is 0, price list 1. So that follows this query. This query already has them set up to give you the right number. So this has to be 0. Whenever you see a blank inside of SAP's query window, it just hides zeros. So that's 0. And this is 1. If I wanted to update the other ones, I would use 2 and 3, 3 and 4, etc., because line num is what's called 0 base. Again, you could see how already leaving behind some less technical users, it just makes it a little bit more complicated. So you can see why I don't necessarily love to show users this method. So traditionally, you'd need 2 files. You would need a record key file and an item to tag the item code. But recently, you don't need this additional one. you can just do it like this: record key, line num, price list, price, and currency. I guess the benefit to this is it's its own utility that can run on the server, and it can do multiple price lists at once. You could do your whole price list at once, all of your price list updates at once. Again, I don't necessarily think it's smart to do 10,000 rows at a time, but that's up to you. And again, in certain systems will usually tolerate it. I think 10,000 would be the absolute upper limit of what I would do. I would probably break them out into 1,000 if possible, just to make sure. And definitely do it, do 5, 6, 7 as a test like this, and just make sure everything works good. You don't want to launch into what you're doing with the DTW and then have it fail. You want to fail quickly if you're going to fail. So make sure you have kind of a good setup here. This can also do the additional currencies. We can provide the templates for this for the additional columns too. I'm just trying to keep this really simple. You can change these, etc. So this is the same. I will save this as tab delimited. File, save as, save here on desktop. Tab delimited. I don't like to use the CSV for whatever reason. I just find it is less consistent. ITM1. I call it ITM1. That's the table it's in. Replace it. Yes, it's going to take out the information. Okay, good. So remember the same thing here. This is now a text file, not these tabs are useless. If you start to edit them and everything, they're gone anyways. And if you go to one of these and then push save, you're ruining your text file. So at this point, mentally, I like to say, this one's done, and I just leave there. So now we have a nice clean ITM1. This looks all good. This is exactly what we want. And we can run it through the DTW. Import. This is master data. We are just going to be updating existing data, not adding any new items or anything. Inventory. It's in the item master data classification. Again, generally you want the OITM mixed with one of these other sheets, and you can do all these sheets or just one sheet at a time. Usually I try to keep to doing one sheet. Again, troubleshooting is very difficult if you have 50 different things going on, unless you have a tuned up and very specific template that you've used before. So I just use this for prices here, prices, ITM1. So that's what you need. You can see that it maps all the fields. You can look at the source data and the target data. I only have less than 10, so this simulation will be very quick, but usually I want to just do 10 errors, because if you say ignore all errors in process and then you have 10,000, literally it's, and you have 10,000 errors, it will try to run through 10,000. In the simulation, if you do 10, it will just run up to 10, simulation, tell you if it's going to work or not. And this is usually something that's smart. 7 out of 7. Looks all good. Next, it's going to do this, import, boom. So that was a successful run. If you did have failures, some of them, maybe you had a couple failed, you can filter for that or all. So that's it. And again, keeping the scope of that kind of smaller allows you to more easily troubleshoot that. I find the error messages from the DTW pretty cryptic, and even for myself, like it'll usually say like, error object, instance of another object or something like that. And you're like, I have no clue. When it turns out maybe you just had a null in a column or something, So if I change this, let's just double check that this was updated. Oops. So you can see primary currency is 30. So all these methods, I didn't check them each time, but I know for a fact that they're updating. Okay, so that's our friend, the DTW. So DTW I'd usually use for importing like documents, and if I don't have B1 up, which most of the time I have B1 up now, if I don't have B1 up, I'll use it for master data updates. Like if you're updating a UDF on something, you can do that and just throw together a sheet. So you can do that for items, item master data update, business partner master data update, etc. So that's what I would use it for, more so than necessarily doing it with the price list. Again, there's kind of a higher barrier to entry there. The last one I'm going to show today, I am honestly not super duper familiar with, but it looks like it has some really good options. So this is the inventory price lists and price update wizard, prices update wizard. So this kind of gives you some, I would say, more mathematical approaches to modifying your spreadsheet or your price lists. And in some cases, it's going to make sense. I don't necessarily think this is going to be your primary tool, but it's worth showing you the option in case you have, say, like a blanket increase in price, or maybe you have a percentage increase in price or something. So this gives you different update methods, item prices. So I'm just going to add, my example will just be to add $5 to each of the prices just to show you that. But you can add, subtract, base price list. You can take a base price list and make it a factor of that for a selection of items. So we'll be able to actually select less than a full list. So maybe you want to convert a particular manufacturer's cost. Maybe you want to increase it by a percentage, or you have a different price list and you want to change it. You can kind of use this wizard to avoid, in certain limited situations, you can avoid doing this in Excel. If it's kind of like a simplified blanket increase. Again, the Excel import method's probably the most efficient, but if you do something all the time, this might work well where you don't have to even make the spreadsheet. So you could take a base price list and then it'll end up whatever selection criteria, doing it as a factor of that. Again, for it could be a sub selection of items. You can convert this to a different price list at a specific rate, or you can mess with the multiple units of measure and change those prices. So in this case, I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm just going to say this certain group of items, we're just going to add $5 to it. Very straightforward. Selection criteria. So I'm just going to pick, not for the vendors. I'm going to pick the items, just the same 7 that I was using. You could filter by item group, filter by manufacturer. And like I said, you could say categorically for manufacturer X, you want to increase it by X dollars. Maybe there's just some fee or something they're trying to charge you. And you can also filter by item property. So I'm going to say I'm just going to update the sales price list. You could do more than one. You can also affect the additional currency, add $5 to all of them. This is allowing you to filter it. The simulation here will tell you what it's going to do. So my $30 is going to go to 35, 85 to 90, etc. And then basically I'm going to execute this. Okay, so it'll tell you what has been updated and what hasn't been updated. So this is pretty easy to use, again, in kind of sort of a limited set of business scenarios, but still worth taking a look at. So we covered the copy and paste, which is more of a user interface side process where you can copy it into Excel and paste it. Again, remember, you can do that with any matrix in SAP. Just make sure you keep the headers, because the headers are what SAP uses to match the column rows. What your Excel data is has to be in the same order as what you're seeing on screen. Otherwise, it'll screw itself up. Except, I guess, for matrices, for documents, there's a little bit of difference for that. But for the price list, it needs to be in the same order. Excel import, this is my favorite lately. I have that query that will output a specific price list with exactly what you need. And you can do that to the specific items that you are working with. You don't have to have them in the same logical order as what you're seeing on screen. You can edit those and import as many as you want. I'd say 1,000 is where you should start, maximum about 5,000. Just remember, it'll take over your PC as it's doing the process. And more than likely, you want to kick all users off just in case there's no lock. You don't want any locks on that particular table. If other people are editing prices while you're importing, it could cause issues. Data transfer workbench. This is kind of like the black magic of SAP Business One. You need to kind of have some experience and maybe a little bit of magical powers there to get it to work 100%. It does work. Once you have a tuned up template, it will work very well. The barrier to entry to the data transfer workbench again is a little bit higher. And if all you're doing is price list update, I would probably say that's my last my last choice. Then we have the price update wizard. It's a nice tool from SAP. You know, again, in certain limited business scenarios, you can use that, but I still think the Excel import probably is better than the prices update wizard. And that's where I stand on that. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, you can use the chat box if you have any questions. And if you want to talk to Mike, I'll just unmute you. If not, just in the meantime, so, you know, topics like this cover a lot of different details. So just a reminder that all our webinars like this go on the Forgestik YouTube page that you could revisit. It should be up at the beginning of the week once it's done. So Mike, there doesn't seem to be any questions. So thank you, everybody. And if you need help or whatnot, just reach out to me, Tracy@forgestik.com, or to Mike or support. We're always available. So thanks a lot, Mike. Have a
Thank you
great
very
weekend,
much.
everybody. Bye.
Yep, bye for now.